Hello, mentors. Welcome to our podcast series, Mentorships in Education, brought to you by Just Education at justeducationfirst.com. I am your host, Judi Epstein. I am very excited about the wide range of experts who have volunteered to give of their time and expertise. They will share their innovative ideas, their exciting perspectives, their rich resources, and their research with us. Please continue to delve into these topics on their websites and with your legal counsel, healthcare provider, and education professional. Our guests have information that will be relevant to mentors supporting struggling students, parents, teachers, administrators, legal support, and health professionals. We will address all levels of education with issues that affect academic performance. Our goal is to open discussions and introduce a variety of approaches to those searching for information in a free venue. So mentors, let me introduce our guest for today. Welcome, mentors, to our podcast today, Mentorships in Education, brought to you by Just Education at justeducationfirst.com. I'm Judi Epstein, your host. We'll be coming up on 1 year very shortly on our podcast. The podcast we're doing today is number 19. We've been doing a mini-series on autism. And we started with Dr. Keith Story, our last podcast, who spoke to us a little bit about the transition of young people with autism into the adult world. We had a wonderful story by Coach Jim Johnson about the miracle on the court, a heartwarming story about a young man with autism who was devoted to a basketball team in high school. Today, we're going to talk to a very interesting guy, but also an amazing dad. And I might even say a superhero dad. I want to welcome Rob to our podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for sticking with me here and putting all the effort in that we needed to do in order to make this a reality. Let me talk a little bit about Rob before we begin. He's a special needs parent, a special needs single parent, and he has been for about 18 years now. He's very connected to the special needs community. Rob has 3 young boys with autism. The oldest has a very rare degenerative condition, which we'll talk about in a little while. In 2013, Rob was honored by the Dr. Oz website as one of the 3 most influential autism bloggers. And that is quite an honor by a very reputable man. I guess you've been around for quite a while, Rob. I didn't realize you've been doing this for, over 10 years now?
I think you're referring to ShareCare is the name of the website.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a Dr. Oz WebMD, I think, collaboration.
Okay, all right. Rob partners with a lot of companies to provide giveaways that make differences in people's lives, and I'm sure he'll tell that a little bit more about that later. His site, the Autism Dad, is one of the most popular autism sites, as I mentioned, and I read some of his blogs, and I will only say that his bluntness, almost brutal bluntness about his life, it's heartwarming, but it's also enlightening. The fact that he's devoting himself to helping so many people, I think, is a testament to his devotion to his own children. So let me get started with a little bit, Rob. You have so much to tell about your personal story, and I don't know where you want to start, but I like the phrase that blogging for you became a portal to the world for you. I just love that. Maybe you can start a little bit there about how you got into blogging and podcasting, and maybe segue into your family.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me. I think it was summer of 2010 is when I wrote my very first article, I guess. And my wife at the time she was very much into writing, and I was not at all. But I was also struggling with a lot of the things that our oldest was going through, and I needed some kind of outlet. And she wanted she suggested like a journal or something, and I don't do paper and pen, so she thought a blog would be an attractive option for me because it's techie, and at the time it was sort of a new thing, and so I got that set up, and then it was an outlet for me, and it's tough when you're going through a lot of those things for the first time. It's tough when you're going through them at all, but the first time is really rough, and I wasn't coping very well, and so what ended up happening was I would write whatever it is that I was feeling or thinking in the moment, and then I would send it on, and I thought, I was very naive at the time, but I thought that was it. Like it just went to some place where no one would ever read it. I didn't understand at that point in my life that the blog wasn't set to private. And so I started getting comments, and I was just floored because I didn't know how people would figure it out. But it became it was something that I think people related to because I'm very, you said blunt, which is true.
Yes.
And I try to look at it as I'm very honest, and I'm very transparent. Because I think, there's a lot of people that are going through similar things, and not everybody's comfortable talking about it. So I was like, it doesn't bother me to talk about this stuff. I think it's important, and it just sort of evolved. And then you mentioned there's been some recognition and things like that, but it just became, it's very therapeutic for me. I can write this stuff and then walk away from it, and it makes me feel like I'm carrying less, and so it just helps me to sort of process things and then put it behind me, I guess, if that makes sense. And
yeah,
it helps a lot of other people because they realize that they're not the only person feeling that way. I have people tell me all the time that I say what they're thinking, but maybe they're uncomfortable saying themselves. And it just gives people insight. Like my experience as an autism parent is vastly different from the next person's. It's just the way it is. But it gives you insight into what they might be going through. And it just helps people to, show compassion maybe more than judgment. And I guess that would sort of be it's one of my goals, is to try and get people to stop and think before they just react to something that they see, because there's a lot of times there's more going on beneath the surface than what you're aware of.
It's the old adage, don't judge until you've walked in my shoes, I guess.
Yeah.
And you have 3 boys, and that
I do.
And why don't you talk a little bit about those young men, because I know that they've been a motivator for you to do some of the writing that you've done.
They're a motivator for me to just get out of bed sometimes, to be honest. Gavin is, he's 19 and a half. Well, my gosh, he's 19 and he'll be 20 in January. So that makes me feel really old.
Yeah.
He's a really good kid. He has a lot of challenges. You had mentioned degenerative condition. He was eventually diagnosed with childhood disintegrative disorder, which is a very rare form of autism where a child develops, typically they hit all their milestones until somewhere in the age of like 3 or 4.
Right.
And then seemingly it feels like you put them to bed, one person, and they wake up somebody else. And it's not that dramatic, but it feels that way. Because I guess there's a lot that happens, and you don't notice it right away because it's subtle, and then you just sort of hit a threshold at some point where personality changes, likes and dislikes change. He disconnected from everybody. He became very robotic in a lot of what he did.
I've never heard of that. Have you met anyone else who has that? Any other families?
Not in person, I haven't. No.
Okay.
He's seen at the Cleveland Clinic. We live by the Cleveland Clinic, so we're very lucky to have that. And childhood disintegrative disorder, his specialist would tell me that they might see one child every 5 years come through the clinic that is diagnosed with it. There's not a lot of research because it's incredibly rare, and it's the kind of thing where that was my first experience with autism was that, and so it's sort of very different than how my other kids present, because this entails, it's degenerative, and so there's health issues that I guess go along with it that explain a lot of his health problems.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of skill loss.
Will it continue to degenerate, or does it reach a plateau?
It's supposed to. Well, from what they know, typically they reach a plateau like in their early teens,
mm-hmm.
and then they just sort of stay there. There's no positive prognosis for this, but then at the same time, nobody really knows how it plays out, I guess. In his case, developmentally, he's about 5 years old developmentally.
Wow.
He's developed schizophrenia. He developed epilepsy. He lost his immune system. He has a very rare autonomic disorder where his brain just sort of stops controlling vital function in his body, like blood pressure and body temperature and things like that.
Rob, does he go to a school each day? Is he home each day?
He's home.
He's home.
He's home every day, yeah.
And so you have help in the house that helps you with him?
No, I handle him. Yeah, wow. He does. He does really well considering everything, and he has to do IVIG infusions twice a week. We had to do that this morning, where he just gets needles placed into his stomach and it pumps donor antibodies, and it gives him a temporary immune system, and so he lives from infusion to infusion, and it keeps him from getting sick. Schizophrenia has been challenging just because there's a lot of lines that get blurred with him between reality and what's not, and so he lives in this fictional world where he's a superhero and he fights all these battles, and he's very proud of it. I've interviewed him a couple times where he likes to tell people a story.
Well, he has a good role model for a superhero.
Well, his best friend is Sonic the Hedgehog, and they do a lot of things, but everything is very positive. It's very, they're helping people and they're saving cities and villages and stuff like that. So it's not it's a very positive type thing, and so he does pretty well. I mean, he can make his own lunch and his own breakfast and use the microwave and stuff like that. And he's always asking how he can help, what he can do to make things easier.
He has two other brothers.
Yes.
And do they leave the house each day and go to school?
Oh yeah.
They're
do. Very, very, they're very, very high functioning.
Okay.
Elliot is 13, and he's very, very bright, very intelligent. My two youngest are developmentally, they're advanced. So they're, Elliot's in 8th grade. probably at a higher level than 8th grade, but
Wow.
he's in 8th grade. Emotionally, there are difficulties. There's a lot of sensory related things, anxiety, depression, stuff like that. Emmett is 11, and he's like an engineer. He is
Little obsessive.
well. Yeah, but he sees everything very like he's very a visual thinker. So like he does crazy math in his head, but if you ask him to write it out, he can't. He struggles with that. But he can get the right answer every time, and you can give him complex equations, and you can see him sort of visualizing it in the air, and then he just tells you what the answer is. They thought he was nonverbal at first because he didn't speak until he was about 4 years old. So we had to teach him sign language, or we had to learn sign language. His mom sort of spearheaded that, and I give her a lot of credit for that. She put a lot of effort into that while I was trying to work and balance everything else out. And then one day we got him a dog because we thought that might, like a companion for him would be a good thing. Right. And that just opened him up, and he just started talking. And then he just hasn't stopped talking.
I want to ask you a question.
Ask me a question.
Okay. Because I've been thinking about this since we've spoken in the past. You are such a compassionate person. You are such a patient person. Did this come from your upbringing with your parents? Did this come from a religious background? Did it come because of the challenges you've had to endure? Where did this grow from?
Well, I have amazing parents. That's for sure. I was raised Catholic, but I'm not. I'm not very religious now. I think it's part of just who I am. Really, I guess I don't see myself that way. My kids are everything to me. My family is everything to me. And in my view, I'm not doing anything different than any other father would do for their family. And so I guess I don't see it as being exceptional or anything like that. I just see it, they're my kids, and I do what I have to do to take care of them. And I'm patient because you're supposed to be patient with your kids. And, I do have, like I said, my parents are amazing. I'm the oldest of 6.
Oh my gosh.
And so they, growing up there was always stuff going on. We had good lives growing up. My parents always made sure, we didn't always have what we wanted, but they made sure we had what we needed. And, my dad would work 3 jobs sometimes to support everybody. And, even still, I go walking with my mom every day, every morning. Gavin and I and my mom would go walking. And it's one of the highlights is just being able to walk and hang out with my mom while I'm practicing self-care, which is really important.
Yeah, I have that down on the list to talk about, but I think
I know.
I think you're blessed to have your mom so nearby that you're able to go for a walk with her.
They live 3 miles down the road. It's not very far.
That is awesome.
So I'm very lucky. And even my we've had very supportive family on both sides. So we're very lucky because a lot of families in my situation have extended family that maybe isn't as supportive as they could be, and we've been very lucky. My kids have great grandparents. Everybody's involved, so it's. I have to share the credit, I guess.
Well, listen, it takes a village to raise your children. Yeah. That's what they say. So it's good that you have such a big village with the challenges that you have. You talk about the support that you have with your family and the blog that you're doing. What is Lost and Tired?
Oh, okay. Well, when I first started off, way back when I first started writing, the title of the blog was Lost and Tired. I came up with that name because it's how I felt at the time, and it really sort of resonated with people. It was one of two ways. People either thought it was just overtly negative and I would be criticized for that, or it was like, that's how I feel. I feel lost. I don't know what to do. I'm exhausted, and it just felt like it connected with where I was at the time. And I ran with that for a couple of years. And my wife and I, at the time, went through a separation in 2014. And she had moved out, and it was just me and the kids. And I sort of felt at the time like I needed. It was a different story now, like a different journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to have sort of a fresh start and try and be a more positive example, I guess. And so that's where the Autism Dad came in, and it just sort of, went from there.
I do want to move on, but before we do that, I want to ask you, because I was reading your blog, and some of the comments that people make are not all that supportive.
No, they're not.
So,
if you've been reading recently, there have been quite a few.
It really blew me away. Some of the brutal comments that people make, where I don't know where it comes from. How do you ever get up and walk away from the computer and say, I need to think about this, and I can't believe.
Well, I shared an experience that happened over the weekend, and I don't know, maybe if that's what you're talking about. I thought I was doing something nice for somebody who I felt I could relate to at a grocery store. And it was, I thought that in my view, I was being very respectful. I was trying to it wasn't that I did something nice. It was that it was sort of a very unique experience for me because I was able to recognize similarities in someone else's life. And I just felt a kinship to them. And I just wanted to do something nice because I thought she seemed like an amazing mother and her kids seemed like an amazing young adult. And I just felt compelled to try and do something nice. And that was it.
Right.
I shared it only because I want to encourage people to do similar things,
Right.
And there are a couple of people, and it's a few people that have multiple accounts, who are just overtly negative and just nasty. Really, they sort of twist everything around and make it something that it wasn't. And
sad.
I just ignore them for the most part. Like I responded this weekend, but I did it in sort of I try and joke it off because otherwise it does, sometimes it gets under your skin. And there have been some really, I've had death threats. I have had.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding?
No.
Oh, what for? I can't even imagine why anybody would get to that level.
Well, I think the bigger your reach, the more people you can come across who seem to just have nothing better to do with their time than to try and make other people's lives miserable. Oh. And nothing's ever come of it, and
right.
Some of it's on social media, some of it's off, and their accounts get shut down and whatever. But it just, there are times that you're right. You sort of step back and you're just like, oh my God, is this worth it? I thought, like, I feel truly like this is a positive thing, and to twist it into something negative and it just takes away from what I'm trying to do, and it is frustrating. And I wouldn't want my kids to read that stuff. So I usually try to block those people, but only because I don't want my kids to read what they're saying. It's a balance.
Have you had a conversation with your boys about autism?
Yes. Yeah. They are all aware that they're on the autism spectrum. We don't really talk about it because it's just become part of our lives.
Right.
Not because we don't talk about it, but like when we were at the store over the weekend and I ran into that family that was behind us in line, they recognized that gentleman was probably autistic. And I think that comes from, what I do and then just talking openly about things and how everybody's different, everybody's brains work differently. And it's not a bad thing. It's just people are different. And
yeah, the neurodiversity, the new term that they're using now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so we've talked about it. It's not like I don't walk around saying, hi, these are my autistic kids. Right. They're just, here's Gavin, Elliot, and Emmett. They drive me nuts. But, it's when it's appropriate to bring it up, I bring it up. Otherwise, it's just that they're my kids. And yeah.
What about socially with Elliot and Emmett? How is that playing out at school?
Well, we're very lucky to have a school system, a charter school system in my area that is devoted specifically to kids with autism, ADHD, and other learning disabilities. So they're surrounded by people who they can relate to, similar peers, I guess. And then there's some mainstream, there's some neurotypical kids, I guess you'd call them, thrown into the mix because they allow siblings and stuff like that so the kids can stay. They try to provide a mainstream environment, but it's built around the unique needs of kids with autism and stuff. So socially, they do pretty well. They're not very awkward or anything like that. They don't necessarily read body language or some of the social cues very well at times. But they're not shy. They're very outgoing. They like spending time with family and friends, and we haven't had to really face a lot in those types of challenges.
Do the boys have friends come to the house? Do they go to other kids' houses? Is it that kind of a social interaction?
It could be, I think, but it's a little bit different. There's a lot of for the term parallel play, where they'll view themselves as playing with somebody else, but they're sort of each doing their own thing in the same place at the same time, not necessarily interacting. But it's like they just went to a birthday party. A lot of their friends overlap because they're at the same school, so they have like Elliot is friends with some of Emmett's friends, and Emmett's friends with some of Elliot's friends. So like birthday parties, they both go to the same thing, and we would have life has been sort of turned upside down this year. My goal was to try and get us to a place where we could have some of their friends come over after school or over the summer, things like that. But we live in kind of a bad neighborhood, and so like they couldn't play outside, and it's been a challenging year to where I wasn't able to focus on that the way that I had wanted to. But it is something that is absolutely possible. It's just a matter of.
So this is an area that you're aware of, and
Correct.
Other parents may also be trying to decide how they're going to get their children a little bit more socially connected to what's going on. Do you have any suggestions for them, or do you feel that?
Well, I'm probably not a good example.
You're not.
I tend to be very overprotective. I was a firefighter paramedic, and so I've seen the negative side of a lot of things, and so I've become sort of hyper vigilant over the years. But it's.
But I know how important it is for you to have your boys be independent. You say that that's a priority of yours.
Yeah. Well, what I want them to be as independent as they are capable of being safely. And I think Elliot and Emmett will do fine in life. I think they'll do well. Neither one of them ever plan on moving out, which I've had to explain to them. I don't know how that's going to work, guys. But like Gavin will either be in a group home or he'll live with me forever. But it is, I work on independent things like life skills and helping them learn how to grocery shop or do their own laundry or wash the dishes or clean out the litter box or, things like that just help them build up a skill set that they'll need throughout life.
When Dr. Keith Story was on the podcast, one of the focuses that he has devoted a lot of time to, the books that he's written and so forth, have been on the transition of young people with challenges into independent living. And some of the things that you're talking about I would assume, be on the list of skill sets that they'll have to have if they were able to move out of the house. You're preparing them in a way.
I did an interview this morning for my podcast with, I don't know if you've ever heard of Lifetown.
Say it again.
Lifetown, Lifetown. It's a 53,000 square foot facility in New Jersey that is devoted to helping the special needs community. One of the things that they've done is they've set up an actual main street inside of the building where they have stores and banks and dentist offices and things like that where parents can bring their special needs kids in and let them practice doing real life things in a controlled environment where it's safe.
Almost like a big mall, kind of a.
Yeah, and so that you mentioned the independent, and we were just talking about that today. It is really important in practice. Practice is important. In my case, it's a lot of repetition. It's a lot of repetition. I feel like I need to just put a sign sometimes on my head and just like, I'm not even going to answer the questions anymore. I'm just going to point to the sign because it is a lot of repetition. And it gets, it can wear on you.
What's the biggest myth that you would say typical adults, typical children have of people with autism? Is there a general?
Yeah, there's a lot.
Okay.
I would think everybody tends to think that everybody's the same. They feel like autistic people they look a certain way, and that isn't the case. I mean, if you were to meet my two youngest, you probably autism would probably never occur to you. If you met my oldest, it's pretty obvious. Everybody with autism is just as unique and diverse as anyone else, so you could line 10 people up, all of them have the same autism diagnosis, and each one of them are unique and as individual as anyone else. It's not a cookie cutter diagnosis, and I think that leads to a lot of the confusion because people hear autism, they just assume everybody is the same. It all presents the same way, and it doesn't, and it leads to a lot of confusion. And I guess that's probably the biggest myth out there.
Is that what you mean when you say the difference between the real world diagnosis and the clinical definition? Would that relate?
Yeah. For me, what it is it's like when you go to the doctor's office and your kid is diagnosed, they approach it very clinically, right? It's this is what is probably going to happen. These are the symptoms. These are the signs. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to look for. Nobody tells you what real life is going to be like. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the big things that I found with my kids was after a diagnosis, you sort of think like, okay, I'm going to read about it. I'm going to learn about it. And the reality is you don't know what to prepare for because you're going to kind of learn as you go. There's no way to really prepare. I have 3 kids on the spectrum. Each time they were diagnosed, I cried for each one of them because I was heartbroken, only because I was afraid of what they were going to have to deal with.
Right.
And, you know, I based on what I went through with Gavin, I was prepared for Elliot. But Elliot was nothing like what we went through with Gavin. So it was a new learning experience. And then it was the same thing with Emmett. It was a completely different experience. And so for me, it's one thing we can read off the signs and symptoms. It's another thing to actually experience it in real life, because a lot of times they're very different, I guess, if that makes sense.
So one of the best things, it sounds to me, that you did for your children was you became knowledgeable.
Yeah.
You must have done a tremendous amount of research.
You research, you talk with other parents. I've made a lot of friends with adult autistic people who are an amazing resource, and you know, it's provided some guidance in times when like we didn't know what to do or didn't know what this meant. And so you talk to somebody who's personally lived it themselves, and they can help provide insight that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
Can you give me an example of when you sought out?
Probably one of the biggest struggles that we've had is sensory related things.
Okay.
And food, clothing. Emmett is super sensory oriented. Didn't wear shoes or socks really consistently until last year before.
Even at school?
He would wear flip-flops or Crocs.
Oh, wow.
Even in the winter. And there was nothing else. He just couldn't tolerate it.
Huh.
You know, trying to understand, you get frustrated because it doesn't make sense. There's nothing in your shoe, Emmett, but he feels like there's something is. Food, he's so picky with food. It's not even picky, it's that he can taste differences. Like if you have 2 bags of chicken nuggets, same brand, same everything, bought at the same time, he can taste the difference between the 2 bags. Color, shape, texture, all those things he's very sensitive to.
So you don't spend a lot of time arguing with him. You kind of find a way.
There's no point in arguing.
Right.
A lot of these things, none of these things are within his control. But what we have to do is find ways of coexisting, you know, in a way that allows him to be who he is, but also challenge him to help him grow to where he could be. And because the reality in life is, I mean, you have to be able to adapt, you know? And so we've always challenged them to a point, and help them to maybe, if there's things that they can overcome, you know, like if we can get him to a point where he's comfortable wearing shoes, how is that not a positive thing? You know, we wouldn't force him. We wouldn't do it until he cries or anything like that, but we would just work on it. You know, 5 minutes today, Emmett, 30 seconds today, whatever it takes to just build up over time. But you had asked for the example, but the example was that I was able to reach out to people in the adult autistic community and just say, to know.
Yeah.
You know, how can I help him with this? You know, like he has to be able to wear shoes. He's got to have something on his feet when he's out of the house, or he's got to wear clothes.
Right.
Or how do we get him to eat? You know, what kinds of things can I focus on to try and expand his menu? Because it was just chicken nuggets and grape juice or something for the longest time. And he would starve before he would eat anything else. And, you know, they can provide insight like, well, this is probably what he's feeling. This is why he's not liking this, or this is why he's this or that. And it gives you insight that he was not able to provide us himself.
Have you been able to broaden his?
Oh, yeah.
And how did you do that? Really?
Persistence, I think.
But how did you? But you can be very persistent, and they still refuse to try something. How did you?
Right.
Encourage him?
I think the key, in my personal opinion, and again, it's probably different for everybody, but it was never to push him too far.
Okay.
it's you challenge him to try something new. You know, hey, Emmett, we're going to go to the grocery store. Why don't you pick out something you've never tried before that might be, you might want to give it a try or something.
Yeah.
And so you encourage him, but if he tastes it and doesn't like it, you don't make a big deal out of it. You know, it's just, okay, well, you know what? You praise him for even being willing to try.
Oh, yeah.
And so over time, he becomes comfortable that you're not going to make him eat something that he doesn't like. And it is a delicate game, and there ends up being a lot of wasted food, and it's really expensive, and it's really frustrating. It takes a tremendous amount of patience.
Can you give me an example of something he picked out that he ended up liking? That was a surprise?
Well, recently, I can't remember the name of the fruit. Rutagan or something?
Rutabaga?
No, they're little balls, like a golf ball size fruit, and it's got like spikes all over the outside of it. And then you just sort of cut it around the middle, and it just sort of pops off. And then you eat the fruit in the middle.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
I've never seen it before. I didn't even know it, and I can never remember what it's called.
Probably expensive.
It's like three. It was only like $3 for like 12 of them. So it was like, well, you know. But he started taking them in his lunch, and I thought, man, there's no way he's going to eat that. But he did, and I was surprised. He started eating steak recently in the last couple of years. Is
that the only meat he eats other than chicken nuggets?
He doesn't eat chicken nuggets anymore. He stopped. Tyson, and if you're listening, Tyson, you got to stop changing packages, because if you change the package that they come in, it changes the way they taste. Oh, yeah. You won't have anything to do with it. And he hasn't touched them in probably 2 years. Wow. And it's very common. I can't tell you how many parents experience the same thing. And it's one of those things. You just gotta roll with it and just find what works.
So I want to get into a little bit in the time we have left, into your words of wisdom to parents with children with autism who are on the spectrum, and also segue a little bit into you have a blog, and we're going to talk about the Autism Dad so that people can certainly go to your blog. But what other resources are there out there? What other supports would you suggest that I saw where you interviewed someone, Mightier, a video game, for example. You know, what's that all about? What is the GPS for kids who wander? What about community agencies? I mean, there's a lot of different bullet points here I have.
And one of the challenges with that is that services, as far as community agencies and stuff go, is very localized.
But the same kinds of things will be in different areas. So if you say you went to the Y and got information, or to the local education department, other people can go to those agencies but also.
Autism is really it's one of those things where there's either services or there aren't. Okay. In my experience. Where I live, there really aren't anything. The closest that we go is like Akron Children's and the Cleveland Clinic. And we have Summit Academy is the name of the school system. I have parents that have absolutely nothing. They can't even get their kid diagnosed because there's no one who does the diagnosis.
Are you kidding? In this day and age? Wow.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's all localized. So if you're in a more rural area, there's a good chance you're going to have fewer services available to you, just because funding is a huge issue. You know, as far as I'm a big supporter of the Autism Society. I really, really like the Autism Society. They are localized, and they have local chapters all over the country. They're very grassroots. Money that is raised at their walks, their fundraisers, whatever, stays within the local community. It's not shipped back to a home office somewhere. So when you contribute to what they do, you're really helping the people in your community, which I think is important. The GPS stuff you mentioned, I worked with GeoBit, and that's a GPS tracking solution for kids that have a propensity to wander. I mean, that's wandering is a huge problem for kids on the spectrum. And so, you know, I've used a lot of products. I was part of a startup for a few years for GPS stuff, and I found that GeoBit is the best solution that I've come across. I really like it.
Okay.
You mentioned the Mightier.
Yes. What's that?
Mightier it's my all-time favorite. I talk about it all the time. Mightier it's out of Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical. It's sort of biofeedback for kids. It helps them learn to self-regulate. But it uses video games and a heart rate monitor on their wrist or their arm, and they integrate the real-time heart rate into the game, so they're visual on the game. And if the kids become frustrated or they get worked up or whatever, and their heart rate goes into the red, the game becomes harder for them to play. And so when they use their skills, coping skills, to get their heart rate under control and get their emotions in check, the game they can see it visually improving, and then the game becomes more fun for them to play.
It's fascinating.
It's amazing. I can't. We've been using it here for over a year. I hooked up with them about a year ago, a little over a year ago now, and they are they've been around for a decade, I think, but it's been used in a hospital setting and not wasn't a consumer product, and so recently they made it a consumer.
Can Gavin play it?
Yeah, anybody can play it.
All the kids. It's for all levels. Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's limitations. I mean, you have to be able to hold a tablet or a phone and play the games and stuff. But there's really not they don't realize that they're learning. You know, they just.
That's the best kind.
Yeah, because if you're like, okay, guys, play this because it's going to help you have fewer meltdowns, they're going to be like, no way, it's not going to be fun. But if you just say, hey, play this, guys, check out it tracks your heart rate, and it's like you're part of the game, whatever. They found it really, really fun. Emmett was the one who I used it the most with because he had more outbursts. But it works for adults. It works for kids with autism, without autism. It just helps kids learn to self-regulate, and they can eventually apply what they're learning in the game. They apply it to real life, and they don't even realize what they're doing. So it's really, really cool.
That is neat. What is Vivint Smart Home Equipment?
Vivint Smart Home.
Oh, Vivint. Okay.
Vivint Smart Home. I worked with them for a few years, and my son is shoving his hand under the door. They have a foundation called the Vivint Gives Back Foundation, and what they do is they basically donate smart home equipment to special needs families, more kids with autism who have a propensity to wander. And they donate the equipment so you can have the doors and windows monitored. You can have cameras in the house and outside of the house, motion sensors for at night. The idea is that you can intervene or limit your child's ability to elope. And then the monthly service is based on your personal income, so it's a sliding scale. So I think we pay like $15 a month for ours. And I made sure that I went through the exact same process that all the other families would have to go through. I could have had it for free as part of like the ambassador thing, but I wanted to go through the same process, and it's they're very cool.
That's interesting. It never occurred to me that something like that would be available. Do you want your son to come in and talk to us at all, or?
Hey, Emmett, do you want to come in and say hi? Can you just open the door, please?
Yay.
Oh,
okay.
Great.
You can come in and say hi to Judith.
Cool.
Shut the door so that we don't get the dog. Okay.
Who is this?
This is Emmett.
Hi, Emmett.
Hi.
It's so nice to meet you.
I have my headset on.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Here, you can put that in there.
It's so nice to meet you. What do you think about your dad being such a well-known celebrity?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I think, that's a little bit.
Okay. Do you know that a lot of people know who he is? Do you know that?
Huh?
Do you know that a lot of people know who your dad is?
Yeah.
Do you know that your dad talks about you and your brothers a lot?
Yeah.
So you're kind of a celebrity too. That means that a lot of people know you too.
Yes, close, otherwise you're going to disconnect your headset.
Okay. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. I just wanted to meet you.
Oh, he said he wants to.
Oh, you want to? Oh, that would be great.
Well, one of the things that I like to do is I like to involve them.
1 second, I'm gonna pull up a chair.
You don't need to pull up a chair. I mean, it's not going to be that much longer.
It's going to make himself comfortable.
Here, you sit on my leg there. I like to involve them in this stuff as much as possible, because as much as I need the world to be understanding and accepting for them,
right,
I want them to be understanding and accepting of other people as well. So we focus on tolerance and inclusion and treating everybody the way they deserve to be treated, and we don't judge people who are different. We stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. And Emmett and I, we're going to start doing, I want to start having weekly or bi-weekly episodes of the podcast so they can sort of like each have their own little show where they can talk about things that are important to them or whatever.
I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Is there anything special, Emmett, that you're going to want to talk about?
I don't know.
He likes random facts.
Oh, what's that?
Just sort of kind of bizarre facts that when you hear it, you're like, there's no way that can be true. And it is. Like, what's the DNA thing?
Oh, yeah. If you uncoiled all of a human's DNA, it would stretch from to Pluto and back.
Oh,
that's gross.
But it's an interesting fact.
It is an interesting fact.
He's like a walking encyclopedia. I don't even question him most of the time. If he tells me this is what it is, I'm like, okay, I just must have learned it wrong.
Do you know what the game trivia is? Trivial Pursuit? Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I've never played it.
I bet you could write your own game.
We're really into puzzles right now.
Oh.
We've been doing 1,000-piece puzzles. That's sort of.
Oh my gosh.
Emmett,
like if you could give other children some wisdom, some special information that you have about how to deal with a dad who stays home every day, what would you say?
I would say if that is how it is, if they work at home, then they should be glad that they're not like that their dad isn't going to work every day and they get to hang out with them more.
Would you advise them to listen to their dad and follow the rules?
No editorial comments from Dad.
Unless you're like a toddler. The toddlers don't listen.
Toddlers don't listen, no, but you know.
We're coming almost to the end, so I'm going to ask your very special superhero dad if there are any comments that he would like to make before we close off, any direction he would like to give to parents before we leave.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm very accessible. So if anybody wants to connect with me, you can find me at theautismdad.com.
Right.
My podcast is linked on there. All my social media is on there. I'm try to respond to everybody who reaches out. And then I guess the other thing is I'm very, very big on self-care. It's hard to give people advice as to what to do with an autistic child, but the one thing that is universal is that if you don't take care of yourself, you can't be what your child needs. It's unsustainable.
Yeah.
And so
I was talking about this yesterday, wasn't I?
About
Remember how I said you work every day and you need to take a day off?
Yeah,
oh, wow. We need to listen to our children sometimes, huh?
Yeah, I guess. But it is vital. Self-care is important because being a parent in general is stressful. Even when your kids are as amazing as mine are, they can really test you in lots of ways.
Yeah.
And if you don't take care of yourself, then you can't be what they need. One of the big misnomers is that you're supposed to your kids always come first. You put them first no matter what. If you do that, you're going to fail because it means you're not taking care of yourself.
Right.
You have to be selfish before you can be selfless. And if you spend everything in your account, what do you have going forward? So you have to replenish. You have to put back into yourself so that you can give to your kids. And it seems counterintuitive to a lot of people, and they feel guilty about it, but you have to get into. It's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give to newly diagnosed families is you have to get into a habit of taking care of yourself, take care of your marriage. If you're married, you have to prioritize all those things, because the stronger you are, if you're married, the stronger your marriage, the better off your kids are going to be. If you're a single parent, the healthier you are, the well-adjusted you are, the more centered you are, the better off your kids are going to be. And it all requires you to take care of yourself. So that's one universal piece of advice that I give everyone.
That's wonderful. I want to thank Rob Gorski and his son, Emmett.
Yep.
For joining us today. It's been an honor to have you, Emmett. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope everyone will go to justeducationfirst.com and look at our menu of guests and the topics that they have offered to share with us. Thank you, mentors, so much, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, mentors, for being with us today. If you found this podcast of value, please visit justeducationfirst.com to subscribe to our blog and mentorship and education podcast so that you may continue the exploration with us. Our goal is to provide a free treasury of information for our listeners so they can become acquainted with the amazing resources that we have available to us. We want to thank all of our guests for giving their time and sharing their wealth of information with us. Please also visit their websites and explore more of their resources to further your pursuit of the topic. Hope to hear from you at justeducationfirst.com. Have a good week, and thank you.